I wrote poetry for a real long time, and I've written hundreds of poems, and this is the only one I've ever memorized, and it was on accident. I don't know how I did it, but now I know it. So I'll no longer apologize for the things that I say or the way that I say them. Like the other day, when I said that I know you, now known so untrue, for I can only ever know you better than before, which I do. But that is even only just a window and a door. To pick, choose each word to use turned into a bore of a chore, which tore at my core as I was left less uneditedly me and more who I thought you all would like me to be. I'm coming alive in my bones in coming to own my own sense of self. Not a pretty me picture to set on a shelf, but the boat on the river floating the flow. In knowing I'm going, no need for my rowing, for my path is raging and roaringly assuring me to where I've always been going to go. The end. You can do whatever. But to say, don't know how I memorized that one. It just stuck with me, I guess, or it's Dr. Seuss-esque. But to really, it was a theme I've been trying to put to words for a while that, gosh, even if you spent your entire life talking to somebody else about yourself, you would still never be able to use enough words or enough time to adequately explain your own personal experience. Mm-hmm. There's just not enough. You can't do it. You're only ever going to get a window and a door. You're only ever going to get a perception of a person. I think you posted something about that the other day that even the ideas we have about ourselves is just pragmatic, just good enough to get through the day, but not a whole understanding of who we even are and how we perceive ourselves based on how other people perceive us with the limited knowledge they can have, just based on what we tell them or what we show them with our body language and whatnot. And a lot of that we are not privy to. That this whole idea about reflections. Have I talked about reflections yet here? That like I don't think I have.
I think it was something that I didn't post. Like seeing yourself in a video is always kind of a weird experience, right? Because you're seeing yourself as other people see you, which is not how you see you.
You can't even like hear yourself, the real decibel that you are, and you hear yourself record and you go, oh, that's not what I sound like. And even that's not really what you sound like, because you're still like, your own perception is altering the experience you're having of that. The reflection idea that like we can all see each other better than we can see ourselves. You think that you'd be the authority on you, and not that anybody, and you are, but even you don't know 100% of your own game. But other people can witness you and they can go, oh, I like this about that person, or I don't like this about that person. And the idea of reflections is that they can only experience in you what is within them. So if someone doesn't like something about you, it's really that they don't like that about themselves, and they're witnessing that reflection, and therefore they can't see it in themselves. So they go, you're the problem, but it's not. And if we could understand that more, it would solve a lot of issues. But vice versa, if you see something wonderful in something and you go, oh, I love that about that person, you only experience that because you are also of that vibration, or you would not be able to take it in. But because of that, we're all experiencing each other on very different levels based on our own personal setup. The experiences that you've had thus far have molded you in such a way that you're going to experience yourself and others in very different ways. But we're not really privy to that. We're just going, you're you, and not to say that if you see something terrible in something that it must exist within you, but that it's this whole idea of like the parameter of humanity as a whole, that like you can experience that because it is either part of your light or your shadow. And then, oh, what progress we can make, how forward we can go if we can instead go, well, you're really annoying to me right now, but maybe I need to be aware how I can also be taken that way sometimes. And because I can't do anything about you, the only person I have any control over is me. And that's a way that I think that we can actively change the world. As I've talked about before, we can change ourselves, but in these ways, to be aware of what we are all showing each other instead of going, you're the problem. There's no problem. I had that the other day. Sometimes I can be a lot. And I had been trained for a long time to make myself smaller to fit into other people's situations. So I had a moment the other day where I got really emotional because I wasn't communicating clearly, and I knew that I was being misunderstood. And so I got emotional. I said, let me just go for a walk real quick. And I went for a walk, and I was talking to myself in the bamboo grove to say, listening to what my brain was telling me anyway, listening to the program I already have. And I caught myself saying like, well, you're the problem. And I said, wait a minute, let's stop. There is no problem. There's just a breakdown in communication. And just because I communicate differently does not mean that is incorrect. Does not mean that is wrong, or that I need to change anything. But I do need to be aware of it. I need to know how I am both being received and being transmitted. but also that's a reflection too, that like what I was not understanding in them is how I am also not understood. And I also get really diggy that I'm like, well, let me do something about that right now. That's not always necessary. And maybe I'm a little too hard on myself to say. Sometimes awareness is enough to say, okay, I see clearer. And now I'm not upset with that person because they're not understanding me. And I don't have to be upset with myself that I'm not being understood. I just need to understand what's happening and be aware so that I can have better experiences in the future, with specifically communication being my main bag that I want to get real good at, which brings us to our topic about meaning and understanding. I can stand up here and talk blue in the face endlessly. And I really think I could now. When I first started doing these, I said, I don't know if I can talk for an hour. Well, sure enough, I could talk for several. I know that now. But to say that I could talk all day and I could mean a lot of things, but if you don't understand what I meant, then there's a bridge in the middle that we did not cross. Like there's a crevice.
There's a bridge right behind you.
There is a bridge. So let's bridge this communication between meaning and understanding. Here we got meaning. Here we got understanding. What a wonderful symbol we have of the New River Gorge Bridge. What a treat that is that we get to just have that in our state, like so close. I enjoyed working in Fayetteville to get to experience. I would drive down Fayette Station Road and go down the bottom, just drive up the other side just for fun. And and that's maybe an analogy that I would go the long way to communicate, go over that little river, go back up the other side just to go back the way I came.
Not to sidetrack it too much, but one of the interesting things about the bridge is that you can't appreciate it if you're on it.
That's true.
Right.
You can't see the bridge while you're crossing it. Unless you're riding a bike across it, which is the first way that I ever experienced it. I would not recommend it. But it was a joy because I did stop halfway and I leaned over the side and was like, what a thing. So that was the only way. But even then, I didn't get to experience the vastness of its fullness than you can from a different perspective below. You're right. Good one there. I like that. Seems like feedback's good. But it does always derail me. Meaning and understanding. That's what we're talking about today. That we need to, I will get better. No, I won't. I can't promise I'm going to get better at quoting people authentically. I feel like it was Alan Watts, but I'm not really sure. Said something to the effect of that, like, all suffering and all war and all arguments and all breakdowns in human communication and cohesion is because of the divide between meaning and understanding. If we could somehow bridge that.
What do you think of Hitler and Stalin? If you really understood Hitler and Stalin, both of whom apparently wanted to conquer much of the world and to be dominant and to suppress all kinds of thoughts of other people and even kill them, would just understanding them help a great deal to bridge the gap?
I wonder that. And while I don't know much about either of them personally, because school was a long time ago and I did not retain much of history class, I have thought for a long time that, like, what would have happened if you could have intervened with their childhoods, I do believe that a lot, that at one point these men were small boys and that a lot of maybe how they viewed the world and the people they became, what could have been done if childhood was more, because didn't they always say that, like, Hitler really wanted to be an artist and, like, he couldn't get into art school and he did all these paintings and so then he gave it all up and became who he was instead. I think there's a story, I don't know if it's true or not, that said he tried to get into art school and they told him he was terrible.
I've heard a story.
Yeah, they told him he was crap, but give up art. So he did. He pursued a different career. So what would have happened if he had a supportive role model in his life to go, yes, pursue art? How history may have been, we cannot say.
What do you think about character disorders? There are people who have character disorders and they don't change. It's part of their character. And it's not that, oh my gosh, if you really understand them, they'll change.
Well, that gets
it's
into
part of the character and they don't change.
Can we put a note and discuss it after? So we don't want to derail her too much.
That's fine.
Okay.
But
I think it's a good thing to discuss, but let's let her.
I would like to do another discussion at some point about that because that gets into the idea of nature versus nurture, and how much we can agree that we are born a particular way or how much the life that we live in early childhood affects and shapes who we end up becoming.
Yeah, she does a pretty good discussion afterwards, so we can we can like, get into it.
I'm Jazz. She left. We'll
Yeah,
get.
but she said she wanted to discuss what we were talking
Yeah.
about. That's what I
We
was
jumped.
doing.
We jumped to Hitler real quick though. That was quite a jump. But even that, the way in which like that we could never talk about all the things there are to talk about. Isn't that funny? We could sit in this room for the rest of our lives and never run out of things to say or ways to say them, or ways to receive them or ways to mean them. It's interesting that specifically we could talk forever about anything, but if we don't understand each other at the end of the day, then we'll have just been a waste of air and vibration. Maybe not a waste, because how much are we talking for our own sake? You know, how much are we speaking to hear ourselves, and how much are we speaking to transfer knowledge and information? How many conversations do you have in a day that are just about whatever, that are either to the person to hear themselves talk about how their health has been, or how the weather's been, or what their family has been up to, and how much do we talk about how we're really feeling, or how something's affecting us, or things that are important? And so now I can be a Debbie Downer because I walk in a room and I'm like, I don't want to talk about the weather. And anymore, if you don't want to talk about bigger things, then I'm going to sit there quietly and not talk to you. And not as a judgment, but to say that I'm learning I have to meet everybody where they're at. I can't go in a room and just go, well, let's talk about how we're all vibrational frequencies, because not everyone's ready to hear that. Not everybody wants to. I was talking earlier today that says in science, we know that when someone comes up with something with their words that is against your belief, your brain will react in the same way as if they were going to physically attack you. Your brain puts up a physiological wall. And for about 15 minutes, nothing I say is going to get in anymore. You've put up a barrier. Your brain does it automatically. If I say a word that's triggering, or if I say something that is against what you already believe, your brain is going to defend that like it's your body. Isn't that crazy? And so literally I have to meet people where I'm at, because if I go in a room and I just start talking about stuff that they're not ready to hear, they're literally going to shut down and block me out. And I can see it happening. And I'm like, cool. And I've had it before where I've pushed that line anyway, because people have said, well, I want to hear what you have to say. And then here I am 10 minutes in, and they have done this. I've watched the whole process where they recoil, they put a hood up. I had one girl fall asleep. Within like 5 minutes, she was not tired, and her body literally shut her down. That was how she was not ready to hear. But I hope even in those instances that she got some of it in her sleepy state, and it's like a seed planted for later. I have to remember a lot of what I'm doing is planting seeds, and I don't get to reap that harvest. The people who plant the seeds don't get to eat the fruit, you know? You plant in faith that it will get nurtured and grow, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But I'm so thankful for a room like this where you all want to hear what I have to say, because I don't get that in my regular everyday life. Or when I do, I go way out of my way to say, I need your consent. You need to say it's okay before I start talking about this stuff, because it's going to change our relationship. And there's no going back at this point. Because of the things that I'm going to mean when I say, and I'm very particular with my words. A lot of times over text message, people go, oh, I can't tell if you're being sarcastic. And I'm like, I am never being sarcastic. I am always trying to be very specific about what I say. And I will very rarely say things just to talk. I will try my very darndest to say precisely what I mean and mean what I say, because conversation is confusing enough without people being blatantly, what's the word? Facetious for fun, which is going to like say things that they don't mean because it's entertaining in conversation. Oh, that's horribly confusing to me, because we're already trying to communicate, and then you're going to skew your meaning, and I have to get the subtle cues enough to know that you're not really meaning what you mean, and I rarely do. So to say that I'm talking up here to really convey a meaning, but at that point I can be specific as I want, and you're still going to understand it probably differently than I've said it. And we can't get around that. All the experiences that you've had, does that make sense? Like everything that's led up to where you are sitting in this chair now has formed and molded your worldview and your beliefs, and the way you just subconsciously are thinking how all of this runs, how all this is happening, how you are a part of that. That's at this point in your life just subconscious programming just running on its own. You don't have to think about how you think anymore. You're just doing it, which is part of the thing that we need to get a little bit more hands-on with. If we're all just I don't know, 10% more intentional about the thoughts that we're thinking in a day. For me to have that thought the other day to go, oh, I'm the problem. And for me to be able to catch that thought and go, wait a minute, let's think about that differently, because that doesn't help me, nor the situation, nor anybody else. So why? So to go, okay, well, I'm going to be intentional in this moment and choose. I was talking to some lovely people today who had the same sort of story where we were all going excitedly like, I am statements. Yeah. Affirmations. Yeah. Like we're all vibrations. Yeah. And it's so nice to be in a room like that to go, oh, cool. I'm not the only one out here spreading these messages. That's nice to know. But they each also came from a background where they were very sad, downtrodden, distraught people. And they at some point chose to find a path to happiness. And now we're all on the other side of it. This guy, they called him Cornbread. He travels around just ad-lib songs. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience. And for him to also say, oh yeah, I was the most, distraught young person. And then one day I chose to figure this out. And I still choose every day to start my day with gratitude instead of lamentation. And that is a choice. And that is a choice that I don't think all the things I'm going to talk to you guys about, it's not like, I think mistakenly at one point I thought, oh, cool. Well, then when I get to the end of these steps that I've learned, then I'm done, right? And I have to keep learning the life lesson that no, these are tools that you will have to use over and over again. But now at least I'm better at it each time. When something comes up, I go, this is a lesson in trust. Great. Let me pull all my toolkit back out for that. Oh, this is a lesson in letting go. I know that letting go has a lot to do with forgiveness now. So let me pull it on my forgiveness hat. Put those affirmations up on my mirror today, even in our own way of how we mean and understand ourselves, that these words that we're using have so many connotations with them already that when we bring up a word within ourselves, we're going to have our own reactions and our own misunderstandings with what the word problem means or what the word blessed means, or, all these different, we were talking today about how, what word do I use here? Because God puts up a thing for people, but source is a weird one. And spirit's also, for a while I was calling it the isness. And that gets a whole different side of on mental reactions immediately when we talk about just, the all that is, just that whatever it is that people are sitting in churches all over the world today discussing to one way or another, that we all believe in to such an extent that we're all joined to talk about our part of it. Otherwise, why would we be here? I guess for community and for, I think, some level of understanding. I think at the end of the day, everybody's looking for acknowledgement, which we already talked about, and to be understood, to understand and to be understood. And the only way we can do that is with words. Isn't that crazy? That's like we can have visual aids, I guess. We can get some of that energetically. But mostly, we just have these mouth sounds and the ability to understand enough to use them. But say I use a word that you don't know, well, then there's no understanding there. Even if I mean, I think one time I used the word cacophonous and a cacophony. And we had a whole conversation and I used that word several times. And at the very, very end, he goes, yeah, but I don't know what that word meant. And I said, well, so you didn't understand anything that I just said then. Oh, but we had a whole conversation about it. And at the end, it was that he did understand. It's that he had always heard it cacophony. And he had only ever read it. And so that's how so even though we were using the same word, he couldn't understand my meaning. And without him communicating further, he would have walked away going, I have no idea what she was talking about. And I would have been none the wiser to the fact that I was never understood. We have this often that we get too polite sometimes to speak up because I'm a oddly understandable person. And for a long time, I would preface everything I said by, A, I may not make sense, and it is your responsibility to let me know so that I can find a new way to clarify. And B, at the end, I would say, did that make sense? And people took that offensively. They thought I was trying to call them stupid. And I said, no, I'm just that concerned that you did not understand anything I just said. And it's very important to me that I was understood. And then I had to go through the whole thing. Why is it so important to me that I am understood? Well, don't we all want to be? Isn't that the only way that we're not just alone in our skulls, just here by ourselves, is by the means of being understood in conversation? A lot of times I come across people will tell me that they think I'm being condescending when I talk. And gosh, that is not what I'm trying to do at all. I think it's because I'm from New Jersey, but I still haven't pinpointed specifically how that mode of speaking comes across that way. I don't know what it is. Because gosh, that is not how I want to be understood as being that way, because I just get so, it's the more passionate I get about talking about things, people will go, well, whoa, you're trying to tell me what to do now. Oh my gosh, I would never. I'm only telling you what I do in hopes that it's somewhat helpful in your own personal experiences. What you got?
Don't let them force you down to the point and grunt school of communication.
Right?
Oh.
And that's exactly.
Could that be repeated? I didn't quite understand.
Say it again.
Yvonne said. Thank you.
Don't let them force you down to practice the point and grunt school of communication.
Okay.
Ugh.
Thank you.
And that's exactly what I'm learning, is that it is not my job to make myself smaller for the comfortability of others, because as I've learned in my own experiences and others have, you only grow when you're uncomfortable. So if I'm going around just trying my best to make everyone comfortable, well, then no growth is going to happen in my presence. I accept my role as a catalyst, and I accept the fact that it's not always fun for me or the people around me. But I will not rebuke the mission I have come here to do, to say, but I just want to make everyone happy and comfortable. Well, those are not always the same things. And that is too why it came to me that I also have to meet people where they're at. I can't, sometimes you got to grunt and point if it's the only way that they're going to understand what you're meaning. But my hope is that I will continue to vibrate as a level that I manifest people who can communicate past that level. Because I feel this urgency that there is a next level we can get to. That if we can get to an emotional level of communication so that we are more readily understood, then we can discuss more and we can bridge more gaps between us. Because if at the end of the day, or for instance, thank you, good segue. For instance, have you ever met a person and you just can't, you're sitting at the same table, I got Culture Fest, we had to paint these signs. So here's a brand new person, go paint signs with them. We couldn't did the pleasantries, hi, how are you? Hey, where are you doing? What are you doing? There was a wall between us that we could not talk through. Well, I got to meet that girl a couple more times, and now we're like best friends, and she's actually coming to me for advice. And I pointed that out once. I said, isn't that interesting that there was a wall we literally had to climb over between us that didn't exist, that it's like you just have to say enough words to a person until you've made a hole through that wall to go, oh, hey, now we can connect. But gosh, if we could just take those walls down completely or find a shortcut to make quick ladders over them so that we didn't have to go through this rigmarole of, hello, how are you? Good, how are you? What do you do for a living? This is what I do. What do you do? So we could just get to the point of like, hi, what is your purpose in life? And what are you passionate about talking to me right now? And I've tried that. You know, people go, hi, how are you at school, the stores? So I started saying, who are you? I go, hi, who are you? Oh, fine. Wait, what? Yeah, like what are you about? What's your deal? Well, I don't. And then I had to change that conversation to say, hey, let me preface with like, do you want to go deep and talk about stuff, or are you just living life? And so that way when they go, oh, I'm just living life. Cool. Well, now I know where we're at, and I'm not going to try to like talk to you about quantum physics, and we can just go the like, how are you doing? Good. How are you? And go about our lives instead of investing all this extra effort into communicating with people who could not or do not wish to communicate past the level of what the weather is. And that's fine. I think I used to be a little bit more forceful. All of this was a segue too to talk about force and flow, that I never meant to be a forceful person, but I've been told a lot that I am forceful. So I'm trying to find that balance between force and flow. Not that meaning and understanding are opposites, but that they are, a lot of the things that I talk about when I do topics that are and topics, to say that they are parts of the same thing, that force is the opposite of flow, but it's not the opposite like a line. It's an opposite like a circle, but it's not even opposite like a circle. It's opposite like a toroid. And so I brought a visual aid this time because I thought, why not? I love these things. This is a toy that you can buy at the dollar store. It's like a flow hippie toy. But this isn't a perfect example of a toroid, which is a shape that represents a lot of things. So first of all, this is a loose representation of what the electromagnetic field of the Earth looks like, and the electromagnetic field of the galaxy, and the electromagnetic field potentially of the universe, but also the electromagnetic field of like an atom within you and your heart being a generator. When people talk about your energetic body or your aura, this is the shape that it takes. Like you're in the middle, you know, and it's this constant flow deal. But to say, so not even that like flow and force are opposite on a line, but that like if flow is over here and force is over here, it's part of a bigger whole. It's not that they are different things. It's that they are opposite frequencies of the same piece of the pie, if that makes sense. They are like the polar, the positive and the negative ions, maybe. I don't know, too many analogies. But to say, we think of them as different things, like, oh, well, how do I get from force to flow? Well, you flow there first, you surrender. That's a big part of it. But that to understand that they're not different. And I find this, the biggest one being love and hate, is we think of those as different things, but they're really not. They are two polar sides of the same thing, and that we could heal a lot if we understood that. I think I've talked to you guys before about like that it's not, evil and sin or whatever, which are words that I understand automatically pull up walls to say that badness is not necessarily bad. It's just that, if people aren't bad, it's just that they're hurt, then it's not that we need to punish them. It's that we need to help heal them or give them the tools to heal themselves. If we can view things, if we can shift our perspective and understanding about what even the point of the universe is. So if we don't view good and bad as opposites, but as larger parts of a whole, well, then we can more easily flow from one to the other instead of it being this war, this battle. I think the wars and the battles, like I said earlier, all come out of the breakdown between meaning and understanding. When a guy says, I don't know, something like, I hate you, if we can see past his meaning to his understanding, like if we can see past the hate to the hurt, then we have a better understanding of that person and how to better interact with them. And because it's a real game changer if someone comes at you with anger and you try to give them a hug, if someone comes at you in fear and you show them love instead. Reflection too is the fact that we'll match a lot. I know for me as an empath, I will match the energy of a room before I've even realized that I've done it. So instead of being myself, if I walk in and there's an overarching vibe happening, I just chameleon right in there. And it makes me a good people person, but does not make me authentic myself all the time. And then I have to go home and go, oh, or like if I walk in a room and people are sad, I'll take on that sadness and it'll stay with me for a couple of days. And I've had to learn enough to go, wait a minute, is this even mine? Did I pick this up somewhere and bring it home? At that point, I can then do something about it to say, oh gosh, this wasn't even self-generated. And here I am just perpetuating it and carrying it around the world like it's mine to bear. Take a minute of awareness to go, oh gosh, where did I even get that from? And is it mine? And can I then now let it go? Because we need to be able to do that, right? Especially when we need to let it go when it's ours too. But when we're just subconsciously walking around the world, exchanging energies, as opposed to walking in a room and going, gosh, I sense all the fear in this room, but that doesn't mean I'm going to succumb to that. I'm going to be who I am regardless and be, strength or something. And then, the understanding that can then happen beyond wording about it, to be able to mean who we are just at a cellular level, beyond talking about who we are, to just walk in a room and be ourselves, is the most powerful gift I think that any of us have. And I think that's the way that we can change our worlds, instead of changing our meanings to better suit the people to try to understand. I don't know. You really got me on a kick there to be like, instead of having to better be understood, to just better be who we already are and trust that we will be understood when we need to be, and that we can assimilate to try to be better understood. I have taken a lot of words out of my vocabulary, and I've changed a lot of the way that I speak to try desperately to be better understood. And even my goal here is that I will talk so much to you all that I will eventually figure out how to get it into a digestible nugget that makes sense for everyone. That I can give it to everyone and have such a selection of words picked out that no matter who I say it to, they'll go, oh, that makes sense. And then I'll go, great, understanding. Because my sister said today, I said, well, I'm on my way to church. And she goes, what are you going to go give the Lord to people? I said, more, I think I'm going to show them how the Lord's already within themselves. And she's like, yeah, that sounds about right. And to say that, like, I'm only up here just saying stuff, but to say that these are things that showed me how I am the creator of my own universe, and it has benefited who I am in the long run, as you all can see. And I'm only now just reflecting in that to see myself in this way, to hopefully come up here and be even better at this each time and grow in confidence to do this, because you all seem like you like to hear what I have to say. But all I'm saying is that, like, I believe in you guys, like that we're all the answer. And if we could better understand each other, And if I was better understood that my meaning is, I believe in all of us, but it just takes that little bit of awareness and asking and trusting and believing and then letting go and receiving and accepting. And then the goal ultimately being achieving. Yeah. I think that was the end of my little wrap up there anyway. So we can, yeah.
As kind of a wrap up thing, do you have a bridging tool for us?
Always breath. What a tool, like a mental tool, like a thought tool.
Like when we're finding ourselves in conflict with someone.
Yeah.
And like you said, often I don't know if it's often or if it's always, but there's the reason of not really understanding what each other means. What can we do to help bridge that?
Yeah, I'm always going to say breath. That's just me. And I think that's for everybody, though. Like, as a meat organism, I think breath is going to be the most important thing I can ever push, because that's just biological. If you're in conflict with somebody, your blood pressure is rising, your tempo, your heartbeat has increased. You're having a physical reaction to the interaction that you're having, and a deep breath 100% of the time is going to lower your blood pressure, slow your heart rate, allow you to think a little bit more clearly before you say something that you didn't mean. I think that's too. Always try to say things that you mean, even in anger. Even when I snap at people, I will never say something untrue. And it may be hurtful to them at the time, but at least it was not facetious. So I would say also too, always try to be honest, because even if you're never going to talk to that person again, say you've had a falling out with a friend and you intend to never speak to that person again, the greatest gift you could give to them is your honesty and your full feedback, because that person does not know how they are coming across. If they're not aware of reflections, then they have no idea that the way that you're receiving them. So they may be meaning one thing and you are understanding them a different way. And if they're not aware how you're understanding them, then they'll never get to grow. And they will continue to repeat that same problem with everyone they interact with and probably go, I don't know why this keeps happening. But if you were that person to say, look, real talk though, you say hurtful things to me and it makes me feel this way. And this is why we can no longer go, or to even, to take a deep breath, but to, if you're going to be in conflict, because conflict is also the only way that we grow. They say you need to fail and make mistakes to grow. I think you also have to have conflict, because if we didn't have conflict, we would all just be comfortable and just go about ourselves and we'd never have to change. Because if we were alone in the void, we'd never have to change anyway. We didn't have other people around us. Nobody would have to make changes to themselves. You would not be reflected in such a way that you would even know that you needed to change. And there would be nobody to change for. So you'd just be fine just being. I think that's why we come in and we're born and then we're blissful. And then at some point we go, wait a minute, I gotta live for other people and do all this other stuff. And those people are just giving me the best of what they know. And then it's this whole thing that we then as an adult have to unlearn how to go back to just being ourselves.
I wonder if it's a viable thing to ask someone to take a deep breath with you.
I do often. And
I know you've done that.
Sometimes you'll get weird responses, but that's not personal either. Because who's going to argue with that? I had somebody argue tooth and nail one time. I sent out a mass text message that said, to just every number I had on my phone. I used to do this. That just said, hey friend, take a deep breath. Did that feel good? Take another. Have a great day. And for the most part, people said, great, thanks. Who is this? Bye. 2 people said, what the bleep are you doing? Don't come on my phone telling me to take a deep breath. Who are you and how dare you? Who is this? I demand to know. And I'm like, I don't know, you're just some number in my phone, man. I got a lot of contacts, but it's cool. I'm not forcing you. No, I demand to know who this is, because I am angry that you told me to take a deep breath. I am furious. How dare you? And it made me feel really bad. How could I? Oh my gosh, what have I done? 50 good responses and 2 bad ones that got me questioning, oh, I should never have told these people to take a deep breath. After fighting tooth and nail with this person, they get to the very end of the conversation and they go, I'm sorry that's how I reacted, but I tried to kill myself yesterday and I actually really needed to hear that. So thank you for listening to me all the way through, and thank you, and I'm sorry, and have a good day.
Wow. So
to say that I've learned that the people who are going to, you get to do, here's the thing, you don't owe anybody anything. This is what I'm learning as I'm becoming an adult. You don't owe nobody nothing. You can be polite, but that's not necessary really. And so if you want to tell someone to take a deep breath, their reaction has nothing to do with your action. We can't be reactionary all the time. We have to sometimes, as catalysts and as light beings or whatever we are, be the action, even if it's uncomfortable. So it shouldn't matter if you say, take a deep breath, and that person goes, F you, I'm not taking a deep breath. That part's not your responsibility. But I have to constantly remember that the people who are most offended by what I have to say are actually sometimes the people who most needed to hear what I had to say. And I have had successfully a couple times now where years later, people who have violently received what I had to say, which made me learn to meet people where they're at and not always be so forceful about like, but let's talk about your childhood trauma. And they're like, whoa, no, get out of my house. Okay. Years later, we'll go, actually, I really needed to hear what you had to say. I'm sorry that we can't be friends anymore because I'm a big person, but that like 9 times out of 10, eventually they go, I really needed that message in that moment. So you never get to be privy to that. And so do not take people's reactions or perceived conflict always as, because that is too the breakdown of meaning and understanding. They may not understand you at the time. You go, let's take a deep breath, or let me tell you what I need to tell you about how I'm receiving you right now. They may not understand it at the time. But as long as your meaning is pure and your intention is good, I'd like to think that in the inevitable, like you don't get to know how it happens. I've also learned that you don't know if the person you're talking to, I've had people, when I worked on the carnival, I had a guy yelling at me blue in the face. And he is one of those people who years later came to me and sent me a message, and he watches my YouTube videos now and he goes, you helped me. And at the time he was screaming in my face, telling me I was wrong and blah, blah, blah. I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, little did I know at the time, the message was for someone behind a closed door that I didn't even know was listening to what I was saying. Came to me later and said, I really needed that message. So to say that once you follow that intuitional voice that we've all been talking about, like once you're true to yourself, even in conflict, if you can stay true to yourself and not assimilate with the energy of what's happening in the circumstance, you got to trust that no matter for perceived good or bad, like it's always good and it's always right. You guys hear that? This is a Jordan story I end up telling over. It's not, it's a parable, but that story about like the good and bad, I always butcher it, but the short version is like, I don't know, a horse breaks out of a fence and the farmer's like, oh no, that's bad. And an onlooker goes, who can say? And then it stops a robbery down the road. And oh, that's good. And the guy goes, who can say? And it breaks the kid's leg because it runs him down off the road. He goes, oh, that's bad. Who can say? But because the kid broke his leg, he didn't have to go to war. Oh, that's good. Who can say? This idea of like, we at our level of understanding don't really get to say what's good or bad. And so if you're having conflict with that person, that's bad in the moment. But who can really say if you telling them to have a deep breath, like you don't get to know, you just get to do you in hopes that your ways. And I think that's the difference between force and flow. So, and that's why they're also the same, because sometimes force is going to feel forceful and I'm going to walk away going, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said that. But I said it and that happened for a reason. And so it must have been, who knows the flow down the road of how that was actually understood or meant or important.
What that was.
Glass cracking.
It is. Well, that's like Mazel Tov. That's that's energy shifting right there. What other questions can we talk about? I'm done talking so much.
Well, can I do one real quick follow-up?
Before we get to Hitler.
One thing after the breath.
Before we get to Hitler.
Right.
It's a big jump.
I found it sometimes helpful after the breath winner to say, how did you hear
Yes.
What did you hear me just say?
Check in.
How did you hear what I said? Tell me what you thought I meant.
I think that's a practice we could use a lot more in fellowship, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'll bring my, continue, sorry.
No, just that.
I'll bring my journal next time that actually learned a very particular technique, and I can't remember what it's called. I think it came up in an African tribe that like it's very specific that you two people sit down and one person talks and the other person specifically goes, this is what I heard you say. And then the other person clarifies until they're fully heard. Not to say this is how I took it, but to be very strict about, okay, so I just heard you say this and this and this. And the other person go, well, you missed that I said this. Because, and we've talked about that, oh, you weren't here, but we've talked about perception before, that like, you literally can't take it all in. Like your brain can't take in everything that you're seeing, everything that you're hearing, everything that you're feeling, and everything that's being said to you. So you think that you're getting a full picture of the world around you, but you're not. And it is interesting. Or like, have you guys seen that video where they're like, okay, count, people are going to throw a basketball. Count how many times the basketball gets passed. And then you count and you go, oh, okay, 27 times. I said, okay, did you see the break dancer in a a crazy, yeah, did you see this crazy thing that happened in the middle? No, you didn't see it at all. You have to watch it again to go, oh, shoot. Look at my perception is altered when I'm paying attention. And so it is so important to make sure. That's a great feedback to check in to say, did you hear what I had to say? And could you let me know what you heard me say?
Right. Could you let me know?
Because
How did you hear what
then
I
we
said?
can better understand. Because it's one thing to hear and it's a whole other thing to understand. But you got to hear it before you can understand it for sure. Gosh, yeah.
Now you can go to Hitler.
What was your follow-up?
Yeah, it's not me. Randy wanted.
So what you got?
It was talking about
Hitler.
Nature versus
how
nurture.
this applies to
People
like
with character disorders.
the major quote unquote evil influences we've had in history. Like, how would this have applied to Hitler or Stalin, or like you said, people with a serious disorder?
Character disorders
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
who can't change.
And I know you've dealt with people with character disorders.
Yeah, I actually work. Yeah, I work right now with people with IDDs, and my mom actually grew up in that field because my mom worked at a state-run mental institution, and she didn't have a babysitter often, and she would take us there, and we would make, for 5 cents a piece, they make the when you get in restaurant, you get a plastic thing with a knife and a fork and a napkin and a salt and pepper shaker. A lot of those are made in state facilities like that, and they get a nickel per one. And we thought it was a good old time to sit there and make those little napkin setups with the patients and have a good old day. And it was really interesting because a lot of those people seemed like really normal, regular people. And as a child, I would get really attached to them, and then I would have to leave, and my mom would have to go, oh, you can't get that close to this person because they murdered their whole family. And oh, okay, great. Thanks for bringing us here, Mom. But my mom wanted a shout out on my video, and I guess this is the shout out, and this is not what she wanted, but it is what it is. I told her I'd find a way to work her in. I didn't mean to say, hey, Mom, to say that because as a child, I couldn't have known that there was a character development problem with those people. But there were, and how did those develop? Was that lady just born nuts and inevitably going to murder her family? Or, I don't know, did something happen? And so and that's all another conversation, because I'm a really big believer that all that stuff comes from childhood trauma. And that we come in, I don't know, maybe there's karma that has to be done, that you come in and you're already ready to be a murderer when you grow up. But I really do believe that it is the way in which we fail our children in ways that we don't understand that inevitably shape the character development. Now, granted, there are people born who have, the people I'm working with right now that they don't have any control of that, and they came in the way that they are, and they are violent sometimes, but mostly. And so here's the thing that we teach is that no behavior comes from an unmet need. All behaviors are not just to be bad. They come from an unmet need. That every behavior you ever interact with, every negativity you meet in the world is someone who does not know how to express a need that is not being met. And so especially with people like that, because they literally can't communicate to say, I feel left out, or I feel hungry, or I feel simple frustration that gets to a violent level, and we only see the violence instead of the unmet need. And so that was always really poignant to me, to be Stalin, that was bad, but when we can't know, they don't talk about how those people were as children to know what they could have been missing. And the way that people were raised, I think up until recently, we're still figuring out how to raise humans. That's the thing too, that I learned, that no parents know what they're doing. And I didn't know that when I was a kid. And I think a lot of children think that older people are an authority and that they really know stuff. And then you grow up and go, oh shoot, everybody's just doing the best they can and still figuring it out. And so I think we're raising children maybe in a more honest way to say, I'm doing the best that I can. How can I best do this for you? I know there are still people who are not raising children with that in mind, but I don't know.
Sometimes the kids get really mad because they're you tell them, I've had this experience with Sky. You say, I don't know how to fix what's happening right now. I'm just
doing the best I can.
And they'll get really mad, and they'll be like, you're the adult. You're supposed to know.
You're oh shoot, I'm sorry you think that. I try to teach young people that real early on, that if you didn't already know that, I didn't know that until I was 21. And I was that is something I should have known much sooner, because here I am growing up thinking I will then get to a point where I know all this stuff. And oh, what a rug that was pulled out from under my feet when someone went, no. And I said, oh, shoot, this doesn't stop. No, I'm just now kind of getting the hang of it, I think. I would like to discuss that further one day, but that's something we just can't know because there's so little information really known about whether nurture, and we still don't know the answer to nature versus nurture. They say it's both, and I think that's the best answer we're going to get.
You know that there's a.
But if we had a time machine,
there's a tangent to that, which is really relevant to what we're dealing with today, which is like, for example, what is the bridge to a rabid Trump supporter?
Yes, because
Or
the
what do we
breakdown,
do about it?
right?
Do we even want the bridge? What do we do? Do we shut them down? Do we get rid of them?
But that is
Do we
also all coming from an unmet need that like we don't understand. We only see the behavior and not what led up to that, the fear of security, the growing up in a way that made them hateful to other people because fear of their, like that's tricky, and that's a one-on-one basis because at the end of the day, no, they're still people. Like you can't get rid of them. They're just humans who are doing the best they can with the information they've been presented. But there's definitely an unmet need that sort of mentality fills. And that has to do more with the children because I think a lot of it is that they get, especially down south, they get raised that way. And so it's hard to unteach somebody, I don't know, generations worth of racism or hate. But because that's not then that child's hate, that's their grandfather's hate that has just been given to them. But that is still something we can do something about. But yeah, you got to meet them where they're at because not when they're not ready, and they're not ready right now. Plant little seeds of, hey, we all do really agree that we're love and we all have the best interest for each other in our country. We just disagree about what that looks like.
I think sometimes a starting point is finding something that you have in common.
Yeah.
Such
Yeah.
as really good food.
Yeah.
You know,
They were doing that.
Or good music or something.
I got you.
Love of family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that, Detlef, and I don't
Yeah?
know how valuable it is, but if I'm it's more of a matter. I don't know how deeply effective it is, but it avoids arguments, because with almost anyone, I can find some common ground,
We all have so much more in common.
I start off with the point of agreement. I can find something. It's rare to find anyone that I can't find anything